I heard in the movies that if someone walked in halfway through the conversation, that was the most intriguing part of how do you opening a movie is you don't open it with the beginning of the film. You do it in the middle of the conversation.
Okay. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast, Radical Dadicals.
You're breaking all the rules.
Yeah.
This is our friend Zach.
What's going on?
And are you a dadical?
I am a dadical. Dadical of 3.
Dadical of 3.
Dang.
That's better.
That's
than
what I'm
you.
trying to get to, man.
That's better than you.
We've been trying. We haven't been.
He pulled the goalie and everything.
Hey.
Are you shooting slap shots? Or?
Dude, I'm practicing. That is what we're doing right now. We're doing what every man dreams of.
Oh my God.
The fun part,
you're like,
right?
how do I disappoint every man that's watching this? Just kidding.
Dude, and when a girl wants a baby, you don't miss a night. It's great. Anytime you say something that's just a little on the edge, Manny over there squirms a little bit. And it's my favorite thing to do. Sam's good at making them.
We just taught for 4 weeks in our men's ministry on the topic of sex, just flat out. So I'm here for it.
No way.
I'm locked. We're locked and loaded on it.
What's the cliff notes on that?
Yeah, can we dive into that? How do you help the people that want to have sex but can't have sex?
Want to have sex,
Not his
but
problem.
can't have sex.
Because you're not married.
Well, I mean, yeah. So that's the funny part.
You're like, get married.
Yeah, that helps. That's a good start if you're a believer and want to uphold that moral standard that the Bible lays out for you. That marriage kind of is a big part of that. So if you're not married, maybe find a wife to get started. But yeah, outside of that,
what websites do you recommend for that? Finding the wife. I'm just. How do you find them? That's my question to you, Pastor.
I'm going to use the, I think it was Mark Driscoll. He had a line on one of his sermons. Pastor Mark Driscoll, he said, if you're a young man and you're looking for a wife, go serve in the kids ministry because that's where all the ladies are who want children. So maybe start there.
Oh,
It's going to get some single moms.
dude.
Churches will have to update their like agreements to like have parameters for dating in the kids ministry.
Oh my God.
Yeah. All of a sudden this video goes viral and tons of dads are in the Christian. We have a bunch of signups for our kids ministry. What is going on here?
That's why all the preachers on Sunday be like, all right, ladies, I know we're excited that men are serving in the kids ministry, but it's time for you to come back. We're really going to need your help. They need a motherly influence in there.
Dude,
Yeah.
It's hard finding I'm glad I'm glad I'm not in Sam's shoes right now. Sorry, Sam.
What does this mean? I have nice shoes on.
Because
What are you talking about?
dating was rough.
Oh, that's what you're
Trying
talking
to
about.
find a wife.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I remember one time, this is an embarrassing pastor story. A pastor was up on the front and said, all right, ladies, are any single ladies in here? Raise your hands. We're going to pray over you. And I was in the front row seat.
Did you raise your hand as a single lady?
No, what I did was I turned around. And apparently the pastor saw me turn around to see who was single. And then he goes, I saw one really smart young man in the front row seat right here. And I'm like, who was looking as soon as I said that. You know how embarrassing that was? I was like, oh my God, here we go. It's like,
That's good marketing, though.
made it obvious. Yeah, that apparently, because as soon as he said that, I was like,
Who is it? Who is it? Who is it?
Who's single?
Okay. Yes. No.
Tinder dating in church. Swipe.
Hey, I think that is like a healthy thing to do because there's also like really not good ways to approach girls in church.
Yeah, how do you approach a girl in church?
Especially if they do like the brother in Christ and sister in Christ like
That's how it
lingo.
starts.
Well, that's like the worst lingo ever. It's like, oh, thanks, brother. You know, it's like, how do you?
Yeah.
You instantly just lost all appeal. It's like, you know,
Is that like the Christian friend
Yeah.
zone? You're my brother or sister?
Yeah. Well, they say that, and then they end up dating, which is weird. I don't know. You know, something about that. I mean, is that common in Arkansas?
For people inside the
Just
church
kidding.
to date one another? Yeah.
So how did you meet your wife?
I was fortunate enough. I met my wife in college, so I just avoided all of the awkward adult dating deal. I actually got married a week to the day after I graduated from college, and so I was off and running immediately. I didn't have to wait and wade through that pool.
How'd you know she was the one?
It's a great question. I just
When he got his
had a
marriage
different
certificate.
feeling about, yeah, just a different feeling. The ability to invest, the ability to actually care for her, above myself in a lot of aspects. Where you're dating, you will have selfish ambitions a lot of times, or selfish thoughts that things that you want or things that are important to you are more important than that person you're dating. And with my wife, that wasn't the case. That kind of melted away. And so that was a pretty obvious indicator to me that, hey, this is different. This is something that you should
That's
pursue and something
awesome.
we should be paying attention to. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wish so many other people went through that perspective. Well, I decided to love this person more than myself, and I lost selfish ambition. So this is the one.
Mm.
I love smaller towns. My sister's in South Carolina, and I think they like my nephew got married like 19 years old. I love that.
Mm.
And it's when they get married younger and all this thing, I think there's less bumps in the road. There's a learning curve of growing up together,
Yeah.
kind of, but it is way better to grow up together with a partner and learn those things and grow together rather than doing it separate and then to try to bring that knowledge together in your late 20s or early 30s.
It's kind of twofold on that. Like, so when I got married, I was a Christian. I've been a believer my entire life, grew up in church, but I was far from being in a position to lead my household or to have a marriage that was glorifying God in any form or fashion. And my wife, despite that, thankfully still married me. But we were able to reestablish where our faith was. And then, like you say, we were able to walk that out together. So being married at 21 and 20 or 22 and 20, we were able to grow up to 30, bring on our kids and establish those core values together, establish those roles together. I think there's great value in getting married younger. If you have the opportunity when you're a young person, I would never recommend someone not get married at 21 just because they're 21, because life it's biblical. Leave your father and mother, hold fast to your wife. I think that there's a launching point for young people that they hold on to till they're 35 and they're living in mom's basement and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I think marriage is a part of that launch and is a part of that next stage of development, especially for men. I think we see that. But two, you get to learn and grow with somebody. When we have a course in our men's ministry, it's called Pillars, and it breaks down the 3 pillars that we think the Bible, or we see the Bible lay out for what it means to be a man. And part of that study, we walk through the book of Daniel, or at least we walk through the first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel, the historical narrative portion. And one of the things you see in that is that Daniel has a crew of guys that he's walking with. I think the principles apply to your marriage too. You're going to walk through hard things, and it's incredible to have a wife on your team, and someone who's got your back when you're going through those hard times and going through those things, and you for her as well. You have that ability to lean on someone and some of that burden be taken away from you as you walk through some of those more difficult moments in that, especially that developmental period that is your 20 to 30s, when you're getting a career, when you're getting started, when you're buying houses or renting apartments or whatever it is, and making those first big life decisions. You have that person to roll with you in those moments.
I just think it's a good thing, because it's hard when you build that all yourself and then you bring someone in and you're like, hey, I got the house, the career, but they don't know what it cost you. And they don't know the suffering. They don't know, and it's could be tough.
I actually recorded something on this the other day. It's funny, it came up. Looking at, so I used to be an ultra runner before I got kids and busy and jobs and stuff like that, and don't have time for it
What's an
anymore.
ultra runner compared to a regular runner? What's the difference?
Anything over a marathon.
Okay. So are you okay? Are you okay mentally? How are you? Is everything
yeah,
all
good
right?
mentally. I had a weird, I never accomplished it, but I had a goal to run a 100-mile race. I tried it 3 times.
Yeah.
I ran 78, 55, and 40 something, depending on how energized I was for the 3 races. But 78
Have
was
you
the
gone to
closest I
therapy
got.
before?
No therapy. I enjoyed it.
I mean, runners are one thing. It's like, I'm a runner. That's one thing. But then I'm an ultra runner.
Yeah.
That's like,
He's like, I run further than your Toyota
and then I'm trying to run 100 miles. It's like, what are you, Forrest Gump?
That's awesome.
So, like Scripture says, endurance builds character. Whenever you do those races, there's you you kind of experience life in a day. Like all of the emotions that you could think of, you experience over this 24 hours. Except for death, but you get pretty close, you feel like.
Because you physically die as you're running 100
He
miles.
sees his whole life pass before him.
That's what happens. He's like on the 99th mile.
But so when you're in these races, you experience joy, excitement for the starting line, the fact that you might get to accomplish this incredible feat. You could win the race, like all of these things. Throughout the night, you get sad. You're in pain. You get hungry. You get dehydrated. Your friends are there, so you're like happy again for a second, and then they go to bed. You're alone, so you're lonely. Like there's so many aspects of these things that you're like, you experience all these emotions in a day, all these things. But I always come out of them with like a different perspective on what tough is, what hard is. And Joe DeSena of Spartan Race, he calls it obstacle immunity. Like if you can overcome the obstacles in my race, then you can, like sitting in traffic doesn't bother you anymore. Going to the grocery store and then not having your favorite coffee doesn't bother you anymore. You do have a different perspective on hard.
Yeah.
And like I can say, I have 3 kids, but one of my daughter actually passed away. She had cancer a few years back. And through that process, I had these skills that like of not self-preservation, but the ability to kind of not push off, but refocus your energy and everything and almost ignore the pain, endure the pain to get through a season, which built character. It was the ability to exhibit the traits that as a believer I have, but they came out of me because I had, well, one, the tools from Scripture and my relationship, my walk with Christ, but I also had this skill and ability to in a very real and practical way understand what pain feels like and how to kind of ignore it, for lack of a better term, and walk through the tough things and make the hard decisions and do these things as you're going through a time like that. Before you processing it and you going through some of those things, so you can be husband, dad to the other kids and all that first, and then you can come back in on the back end and you can process in an appropriate way because you have the tools, you have the community of believers around you, you have all of those things on the spiritual side. But very practically, if I hadn't experienced the tough times and those long nights of being out running by yourself, then those moments in those hard times where you feel like you're by yourself or you feel like you're going through hell on earth or whatever it may be, that you can kind of walk through those things in a more powerful way or a more succinct way.
I went through a divorce when I was 25 and I would run. I would run, even though I was making fun of this whole run. I would consider myself in that time a runner. Right now, I consider myself a sitter. More of a sitter.
Me too. Yeah, I've transitioned as well.
Yeah, but in that time, I was a runner, and I but I was in so much pain that running it helped me so much, and I would meet God in the middle of those runs, and it was, people would say, well, it was an endorphin rush, and I'm sure it was to a certain point, but also like I felt like I would meet God there, and I would be able to release a lot of this emotional stuff that I was walking through, and I would beat 6 minute miles. 6 minute miles, that was my thing. I had to do faster than 6 minute miles. But I think it's cool. And I think a lot of Christians forget that there's something about not having your cell phone during podcasts that makes you a more advanced human being than the yeah. I think God made exercise in these things that are crucial to us. And I think the church doesn't talk about that enough. I know, I think often we're a sleeping giant because of our lack of physical discipline that the church lacks, So I don't know, but that's kind of something that's always kind of bothered me that we don't talk about enough or encourage, because sozos are great and going through inner healing, but there's something super spiritual about getting out, running, going into nature and experiencing God in that. Cause I do think it brings a huge healing. And I would love to hear about how you process through that pain of losing a child. My daughter was born premature at 23 weeks. So like every week they would tell me my daughter is going to pass away. And all that stuff, but she pulled through, but I just could never imagine, walking through that. And, it's encouraging to hear people's stories. I've heard one other story about a family, and it's encouraging because you're still a man of faith and have God.
For me, running was never an outlet. started the journey running before. So I adopted my first two kids. So it was my adopted daughter who passed away. I didn't have her from birth. I would say that doesn't negate the connection in any way, but I had that as part of my life and a health journey before I had her. So it wasn't necessarily, kind of running to heal in that moment. It was the community of believers around me who helped me walk through that thing. I've talked about it before on other stuff, but the night that we found out she had cancer, the people that we were in community with inside of our church were the people who came to the hospital at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night to sit and talk and pray and to be in community together. It wasn't the people that I'd known my whole life. It wasn't the people that I would have probably told you I was closer to at that point in my life. It was those people who came. It was those people who were willing to invest, to communicate, to pray, to continue to come back and be a part of that journey. She had cancer for about 6 months or so, and so we were constantly in the hospital for whatever it was. They were always there. They were always a part. And it wasn't just, hey, I'll pray for you. It wasn't just, hey, here's some dinner. It was like, these people are part of this journey with us. They're sitting in this room talking with us every single day. And, in the end, being a person who knows their relationship with Christ, knows their family's relationship, having those deep conversations, even with our young children, about what's going on with their faith and that journey. We were comforted when she passed away that we knew where she was headed. We had no qualms. It was sad that she wasn't here, but it was a selfish sad. It wasn't sad for her. It wasn't sad for any other reason except for, tomorrow morning, she's not going to be here when we wake up. And you just kind of, once you get past that selfishness and that kind of internal, like, I'm just mad I don't have my daughter anymore. We know where she went, and we're thankful that we have a Savior who was willing to come, willing to die, willing to take on that burden of sin from us. And so even for our young daughter, it was freeing for us to know, that she's where she's supposed to be, and that that's a better place than we're still sitting. So
what would you say to someone who blames God for it?
All things work for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. It's in scripture. If we could comprehend the reason that God does all the things God does, then it probably wouldn't be a God worth worshiping in the end. The fact that we don't fully understand God, we don't fully understand his reasons for things, I honestly sets his divinity at a stage that is above us so far that we can't understand it. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think we want to know. If we could understand our God fully, it would just be like hanging out with Joe down the street, we could get to the point where we understood, and that wouldn't be.
It's like, okay, here's a perspective that maybe you can challenge me on. If I was in that situation, I came to this conclusion that God's not in control. And that's my belief. I personally don't think God's in control. And if I did think he was in control, then I would have to reason God did this. And if I reason that God did this, it breaks a trust because he didn't communicate why it happened. And most Christians don't know why, as we just talked. That was my take on my grieving processes through life, is that God's not in control. And then the scriptures that I came to that conclusion would be that it doesn't look like heaven. And if God was in control, it would look like heaven. And so how did the church around you, what kind of advice? Because every time I've ever been in those situations, the church has never helped me. They've always come and made it more confusing. They've always been there. And I've always been like, what? Like, I've had, in seasons of deep, dark places, they'll usually come and they'll be like, God's doing this for you. And I'll be like, well, that's not a nice thing for God to do. Am I Job? Then you'd read in the Bible and you're like, and then a nice phrase that I would probably say to be like, oh shit, I might be Job. And then it's like, then God's not for me. He's kind of gambling with my life. Then the other one was that this is not from God. This is the enemy, or there's sin in your life. I remember that one. That was in the 90s. That doesn't happen as common. That's cool that the church came and helped. But in that season, dude, I think in my grieving season, I had to get away from the church to find God. And so I'm actually in a season where I'm kind of coming back to community.
God's will and his plan for us and for the earth, I don't think he's not punishing us. I mean, when we're looking at something like Job's Old Testament, Job is under a different timeline. It's pre-salvation through the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. So the interaction with the divine is different for during that time period. Job is a hard book for some people to swallow because it does have just a very interesting twist when it's like, yeah, you can tempt him. Go ahead. You can't kill him, but you can make his life feel like he wants to die. Like, that is a weird thing to comprehend. But for us as believers, we're past this point of retribution from God for things that we've done. We don't live by following the law. We live by the grace that was given to us by Jesus through the death, burial, and resurrection. And so our interaction is very different. If you're in a if someone's in a community of people who, I mean, they feel like it's your fault, something bad's going on, or they're not there for you, they're not a part. That's part of being the church. That's part of being in community with other believers, is to support and to stand by and to walk through hardship with other people, to walk through hardship with your fellow man, which is what I deal with most of the time. We pour into that a lot because guys specifically like to be reclusive with their pain or reclusive with what's going on. But if you open the Bible and you read it, it's pretty clear that that hardship is not because of anything you've done, because your sin has been accounted for. And so while we are all sinners, we also are all charged to imitate Christ to the best of our ability every day, to walk with him and to do our best to be him, as far as the human aspect of living out a life as close to sinless as we can.
So you're a pastor of a church, and you said you did business. You do business?
Yeah. So I've been in the insurance industry for 10 years now. I'm an insurance broker. I work on commercial accounts and things of that nature all over, mostly Arkansas, but in the past I've worked in all states and done different stuff. The coolest one I was an aircraft broker for a while. So I got to work with companies and rich people who had big, nice private jets and go hang out in hangars and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. But yeah, we did that all over the place. But yep, 10 years or so, been in that world. And we've been entrepreneurs, owned a gym. Like I mentioned, we closed it when we had our last kid. Me and my brother ran it together as part of just a family kind of, not even really an investment. Gyms don't make a lot of money unless you really, really work them. But somewhere we were kind of a hobby and something fun. But he went and got a different job. He became a fireman, and we had another kid. So we just said, we're done with this. just locked the doors and sold all the equipment and moved on. I've been in that and doing all kinds of stuff in those two spaces, and coaching and in business. And
all my favorite pastors were usually businessmen before they were pastors. Like if I ever look through the history of my favorite pastors, they were generally great businessmen before they were ever a pastor. And so I think businessmen, like probably like yourself, it's like you going through those journeys with God and all the sufferings and the good times. It's like there's a practical thing you can now teach. It's not like I hope you believe it. It's like it's just gonna happen. It's just like, no, this is what it looks like when we walk through this time. And so that's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And you're right. There is a practical nature that comes with that. I also think it's a relational thing. Like when you look at guys who go to seminary, they come out, they start a church, and it grows. Like the head knowledge is there, but the ability to translate to a person, people just follow them because they're super smart. But whenever you have someone who has a second walk, and then they come into this position, they understand people's time differently. They have a respect for like their volunteers in a different way because they don't. It's not a full-time job for them. They know that they've got kids. They know they've got a job. Maybe they've got a second job or hobbies or whatever they want to accomplish, and so they can account for those things when they're setting up time for people to serve in the church, which is important, and I think is an extremely important part of a walk as a Christian.
That's so true. My favorite, one of my favorite pastors is, this might throw me right where my theology fits, is Chris Valentin. One of my favorite sermons that he said was, there was this guy he would show up every Sunday and he would pray for his garden or his farm to grow great crops. And every Sunday he would pray, and the pastor would be like, you need to pray more for your crops to grow. And so finally one day, he didn't see this farmer in his church every Sunday. And so the pastor went out to the farmer and said, hey, why haven't you been in church? And he goes, I've had to work on this season. Don't worry, Pastor. I'll be in church Sunday next month once the season is done. And here's, and then he goes, well, sir, you just have to pray and ask God. And he goes, Pastor, that field over there was my field that I prayed for. And then he's like, this one over here is the one that I've been coming to fix and grow. And so his whole message was that balance between the two of like, there should be prayer and execution. And then and it was fascinating to hear a pastor say that on the pulpit and be like, oh snap. Like you've never heard a pastor be like, maybe you shouldn't come on Sunday if maybe Mondays and I was just like, who does that? But it was like this awakening moment of like prayer, faith, and action are inseparable. And it's like, you can't just say, it's like, if you're going to pray for your buddy, it's like almost getting enlightenment from God of how to serve him. It's like, and that it was just like, I was like, man, that's crazy. And so I always kind of mentally apply that.
Yeah, it's so good. But there was like a weird, like when I was a kid growing up, it was like, they would teach it in a way where you have to be poor to be a Christian. You have to be like homeless almost to be a Christian. And that was the only appropriate way to walk through this life. Give it all away. Just give everything to the poor people. Should we support and feed the hungry and support the poor? 100%. But to think that as a believer, you can't see success, you can't work hard and achieve success in business or in farming in that example or whatever it may be, that's such a ridiculous statement to even like process through. Now, some people take it too far where it's like money's the only thing that matters. And that's not a great place to fall theologically either. But, men struggle with this. And I go back to that just because that's who I talk to the most. But men struggle with it because they'll read something like, oh, I've got to sacrifice all of this for this thing. So maybe you should give it up. Or maybe it's just a hard season and you may need to work a little harder to make sure that it does work out and that you do come through. Maybe it's what you're supposed to be doing and you just are feeling some pressure or whatever it is. And you feel like, oh, no, the Bible says I got to be poor, got to give this up. Like, well, that might just be lazy. Like you might just need to buckle up and get ready for the ride that's ahead of you on that. But yeah, sometimes you just got to work it out. But yeah,
this guy loves to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think we have I have a story in my book. I hired somebody that was Christian, and they said God called them to come work for me, and I was like, okay, I'll believe that. I'll go with that. I hired them, and then like the next week, they're like, hey, I can't go to work today. I'm supposed to just pray all day, and I said, okay, well, God told you to come work for me, right? Said, yes. I need to go work there. I need to work with you. Okay. Did God know what time my business runs from? Did he know your schedule? Yes.
Right.
Okay. So, why would he tell you to do something against what he's telling you? And, so he got really mad at me for that. Really upset with me. He later apologized, but it took probably 6 months for him to apologize.
To give perspective, Sam has a business and he has over 200 employees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Lots of responsibility over there, man.
Yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is the responsibility where we stop assuming we can do everything. That's what I'm getting at is I feel like people come in, and even in ministry, I got to help everyone. I got to do everything. Right. I think what I've learned is with my business, I'm not that responsible. I may have 200 employees, but I'm not that responsible. I trust the Lord every day for those people. I don't know how to provide for 200 people, but I do know how to trust the Lord into providing for every person and to do what I can every day. And I'm sure I fell in ways, but to show up to work, do my part, and try to hear what God's telling me to do and obey those steps. But I really can't do more than that. Like I that's the only responsibility I can really have. The rest of the responsibility, I got to trust the Lord that he's responsible. And that's what I think we often forget as Christians is like, okay, the Lord is responsible and he'll take care of my family's needs. If a thing where it's like, I'm going to be diligent and trust the Lord to be responsible. What's your opinion on social media? What's your advice?
If you're mission focused, mission mindset and everything goes back to glorifying God in that relationship with him, then you approach those things with a different way. That's not to say that you don't still look at the number of views on a video or like, man, how do we get more people? And you'll even hear people say like, I could reach more people with this thing or whatever that thing is. But in reality, they just want more people to look at them. They just want more people to see them saying the holy thing. We actually, in our conversation, it was interesting. We were talking about like the use of secular music on reels and shorts, just because of the increased reach that they can gain. And we're handcuffing ourselves to a failing system, and we're not going to reach the people that we're trying to reach if we use this 300 view song. But if we go with the 80,000 views, we are compromising a little bit that we're using this song that others would deem inappropriate. But at the same time, like we had a drill beat over a message about fatherhood is what we put out there, and it got viewed like 10,000 times across a couple of platforms. And it's like, if we had used anything else, it's not going to get that same reach. I have no qualms about the fact we used it. I don't lose any sleep over it. I don't question the fact we used it. 80.
Yeah, we're in the same boat.
Yeah,
we're in the same boat. We're really edgy. I think the one post he posted was, can I say the F word or should I bleep it? He says,
"Dude, you're on a roll today, huh?" He's like, we didn't have a pastor on the podcast, and you didn't say one bad word. You were like behaving yourself, but like, "Hey, a pastor's coming on. Like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do?" It
was a great message. You said, "Hey, if you don't have God in your life, then you're effed," and we beeped it out. But you said it.
I didn't say the word.
I probably wouldn't use that. I probably wouldn't use that to try to bring people to Christ.
He's a pastor.
But I'm not going to.
It got views though.
And the sentiment is true. If you don't have him, you're going to be in a bad spot. So I'm not mad at the sentiment. I might have used a different word.
I like what is it? Oliver Anthony, the folk singer. He shares his testimony in a very authentic, and I think I want to do something that actually can actually connect with someone, because I don't really care about views per se either. What I care about is what's going to change somebody's life.
Like, if none of those people were impacted, like you're saying, in a positive way to make a change, come join community, find their faith, begin that journey as a believer and have that relationship with Jesus, we've failed. It doesn't matter. It's just dudes sitting in a room talking at that point. So when you talk about social media, you're talking about the views, you're talking about the perspectives of other people and using these songs. Like, if Jesus is in that relationship is not the reason we're doing what we're doing, we should just stop doing it. But at the end of the day, we are commissioned to reach the lost people, to make Jesus known everywhere, which is our church's vision.
A lot of churches out here, that's probably one of the more, I guess, struggling things is like doing community. Like being very inviting into that community. I think they all want to do it, but it's kind of like almost culturally, it's over here. I feel like everyone just rejects it. Like, they'll go to a church for like a sermon and worship, not for community.
Right.
And it's hard because I do see churches try to do it. So how have you guys captured doing the community? And not with people kind of rejecting? We
battle it too. It's not as in your face here, just because one, our community is smaller. I mean, I think Little Rock's got like just over 1 million people total or something like that. So, we're in Sherwood, which is a little north of Little Rock. It's even smaller. We're talking 30,000 people or so. So the ability to have like a great impact on your community on a grassroots level is easier for us because we're a big church in a small city.
That's cool.
We can have some great impact there. But when it comes to our ministries and things, like, we honestly, if you hang out with any of us that are on in a pastoral role when we leave the church, we're not doing anything different than we're doing when we're in there. I don't think most can honestly say that. I think most have this, like you say, this religious language while they're in the church. Like, if you come to my house, we're going to sit down and we're going to have the same conversation that we're going to have if we're sitting down doing a Bible study. Like, it's not, I don't know how to be anything else than what I am, which comes out whenever I speak sometime in the sermon, because I am who I am, and I'll say things that some people don't like at times. But I think that realness is what matters. The Bible tells us how to live. It gives us a way that we can walk out our faith. It gives us the target, the standards by which we're supposed to live by. Just do that. You don't have to speak a second language that is churchese or whatever you want to call it to reach people. Nobody cares that you've got that. Nobody cares that you have this great theological exploitation of scripture or whatever they want to say. Like, that's not important to most people. Most people want a place where they can come, they can worship, they can invest in a community of believers, they can love Jesus and know that they're being loved by people who love Jesus. And if you can capture that, I think you can capture a community that'll grow and rally around those people. And it makes it easier whenever you start to reach out and to evangelize to those who maybe don't have a relationship. They understand the mission. They understand the vision of what you're actually trying to accomplish. They're not pushing back against it any longer.
Well, I mean, it's exciting hearing, somebody in the Bible Belt pushing the boundaries and just being, vulnerable and being real. Because we need that. Because the thing is, we all know the devil's come to steal, kill, and destroy. And if we're not honest and vulnerable about this stuff, it eats, it eats many people alive in the back, behind the scenes, and no one knows. Well, that's awesome, man. I've enjoyed this talk. I mean, there's one thing that I'm really concerned about, and that is this superior running thing that you do.
Not anymore.
I mean, I'm glad you set that aside, and we've grown as friends in this conversation because of that.
I will say, I feel like most pastors, I feel like the air gets sucked out of the room when pastors walk in, and you're like, oh, now no one can be themselves, and then there's no real dialogue of authenticity. So my point is you being a pastor and being authentic, I think, is one of the greatest. It's so awesome. It's what I think this culture needs.
I appreciate that,
dude. Just blessings on that, and more support to more people to see, your podcast, and that'd just be, it's like we need more of that. We need so much more of that. And so, because if we can't feel the human nature struggle, if even our pastors, or even we idolize and push them too high, we won't be there, and they'll think they'll never hurt. I just think it's cool. So.
No,
dude,
I appreciate
awesome,
that.
man.
Yeah.
So it's so awesome to have you, man. And dude, man, like we could do it again. It'd be pretty cool. And
yeah,
I won't take it down the rabbit trail next time.
We'll just start down the rabbit trail, and then we can work our way back next time. We'll just let them know where it's at.
There you go.